Gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to agree with my good friend from Maryland. We all agree, frankly, around this table about the consequences of sequestering. We very much appreciate you pushing, you educating, frankly, not only the committee, but through modern technology, the American people, and hopefully the leadership on both sides. I will say this, though. I mean, our problem here is nobody around here can fix this around this table. It's not a policy. It's the law of the land. It was a law passed by Congress, signed by the President, actually recommended by the President. It was his suggestion in the budget negotiations in 2011. The budget he submitted that you're basing your budget on, frankly, is politically, fantasy. It's not going to pass, and he knows that. So at some point, we're going to have to get to something we did 2 years ago successfully, something like a Ryan Murray, negotiated budget. Sadly, I don't think that'll come until after the appropriations process. So, I mean, this committee is going to be forced to live by the law unless there's a negotiation that begins sooner, which I would prefer happen. And I think, again, everybody around here would. But we're going to have to live within the numbers that we have under the law. And sadly, that means we're going to have to make a lot of tough decisions. I do have a couple of questions beyond that point. And one, I'm privileged to represent a district that hosts Tinker Air Force Base, and we're very, very proud to have the facility, and we think it's great. We think it's wonderful leadership. It's no question, it's a tremendous economic boost for our area. And we've tried to be generous in return. I think the original land that the base is located on was donated by the community to the then the United States Army Air Force. We recently, or a few years ago, purchased at $54 million a shuttered GM facility and donated that to the Air Force, or release it to you for $1 a year for 100 years. So I don't think, and we just purchased a $40-odd million landed tract from local railroad to help with the KC-46 mission there, all at the local community's expense, and we are happy to do that. We think that is a bargain for us, frankly. Can you tell me, are there other efforts like that underway? Because you have so many facilities that are wonderful contributors and people are proud to host. So I presume other communities are willing to do the same thing. Do we have a formal program to try and encourage them to do those sorts of things?
We do, we do, Mr. Cole, and we call it public-private partnerships. And so there are other examples, other great examples. You gave a terrific one there, but there are other great ones around the country where we are increasingly partnering with local communities near military bases, and it's usually a sharing of dollars and resources and a sharing of access to a particular facility so that our airmen benefit and perhaps so does the community. So there is that going on, and there's also enhanced use leases where we enter into agreements. You just mentioned one, and either there's some Air Force land that is utilized for some purpose which would be of mutual benefit, things of this nature. And by the way, this is another way we're trying to find efficiencies through both public-private partnerships as well as enhanced use leases.
I would really appreciate, just for the record at another time, if you could send me a list of those kind of examples. I think they're wonderful to know, and frankly to remind other people that those kind of opportunities exist. Last question. We're putting a tremendous strain on your resources in a variety of ways, but right now, obviously, you're heavily engaged in an air operation against ISIL. And I'm just curious if you could give us some sense of how much that is costing, how many resources that we have tied up in doing that, and frankly, do you have what you need to complete the mission? What are the additional things you might need?
Well, not to sound like I'm bragging, but your United States Air Force very much is in the lead within this joint force and within.
You're allowed to brag, Madam Secretary.
Okay.
Yes, you are.
All right. So, we're doing everything from fighter missions to refueling to mobility missions and so forth. I can safely say between 60 to 70% of the total strike missions have been United States Air Force. Well over 90% of the ISR, the refueling, mobility, this is the United States Air Force. I believe the costs are about $1 billion to date, but I'm looking at the chief for verification. Okay, about $1 billion to date for the overall cost of the operation. And again, this is a coalition. It's 15 member nations, but this is the
Could you give me an idea of the relative ratio? I mean, how much are and I appreciate each and every one of them, but how much are the countries that are working with us in this actually providing? I know there's a certain amount of symbolism here, but again, every plane helps, every pilot helps. So how much of the load are they carrying?
I believe there's, if my figures are correct, about 600 or so coalition aircraft, of which 300 would be the United States Air Force, if you're just looking at the aircraft.
Yeah, could you give us the overall American effort? Because I know you're not just the United States Air Force, but we obviously have naval aviators, and I would assume marine aviators involved.
Yes, sir, they are. The aircraft off the carriers are flying about 10 to 11% of the sorties that are being flown right now. The coalition is flying for strike sorties in Iraq in particular, and for some in Syria between 25 and 35%, depending on the target areas. It's a great coalition effort, actually. Everybody's performing well. The cooperation and the coordination has been outstanding. As you know from reading the papers, there's some independent efforts that are being thrown in. They're now being coordinated with our Air Operations Center in the Middle East. The majority of activity is being coordinated through and by our Air Component Commander there, supporting the Army Ground Commander of the task force who's doing this. There's a lot of great work being done. It's not a huge air effort in terms of big air campaigns. If you think about 15 to 25 strikes a day, compare it to 950 to 1,000 in the first Gulf War per day. So the level of effort is focused. It's a very controlled effort because of the situation on the ground, and we're just waiting for the ground force to be developed, and then we'll support them in a robust way.
Appreciate that very much. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
No